Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast. My name is Stuart Teicher. I have an announcement to start off this episode. I am a new grandfather. That's right. My son and his wife had a baby boy this week, and we are over the moon. It's our first grandchild, and things have been a whirlwind over the past week as a result. And while it's an absolute joy in our family, it caused a little bit of a problem for me for the podcast. Things were so busy that I didn't have time to write a script for this episode. And then I remembered what I told you a little while ago. It was only a few weeks ago that I promised you that I would not miss another podcast episode. I think I said that you'd be getting a new episode on the 1st and 15th of the month, and I even told you that you could set your watch to it. So what is a podcaster to do? Well, I had two choices. Option one was to renege on my promise and not give you an episode on the 1st. I did not like that option. Option two was to give you a different kind of story. Earlier this week, I did a CLE program that I called The Slap and the Smear, what Will Smith, Justin Baldoni, and Blake Lively teach about attorney ethics. Yeah, that's the kind of CLE program I normally do because regular ethics CLE can be torture. What I noticed when doing the research for that program is that the Justin Baldoni-Blake Lively dispute was sort of crazy. And yes, it involved a lawsuit, but there's no lawyer involved in it at all. But I had the research done, it was a good story, and I figured, what the heck? Let's go with plan B. I'll talk about a good actor gone bad in this podcast episode instead of a good lawyer gone bad, and at least I get to give you a good story right on the 1st of the month. I figured, there's no way you could be angry at a brand new grandpa, can you? Yeah! And actually, in the process of recording this, I thought of something. If you like this kind of story, I can do more of them here and there. I can sprinkle in a good actor gone bad every once in a while. Maybe periodically it would be a nice diversion from the good lawyer gone bad stories. What do you think? Send me your opinion. You can send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. Just search for Good Lawyers Gone Bad. Or you can go to the website, goodlawyersgonebad.com, and send me a message through the Contact Us page. I'm happy to do a good actor gone bad story every once in a while, or I'm happy just to stick to the lawyer stories. Let me know what you think. But for now, let's hear the celebrity story about Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively, and one of the stupidest lawsuits ever. I grew up in the New York metropolitan area. I was born in Brooklyn. I was raised in New Jersey. My grandparents lived on Staten Island. I went to school in Manhattan. I've spent my life here. And because I'm from the area, I never really saw any of the local tourist attractions. And when I tried, it never really went as planned. I remember once my wife and I were newly married and we were walking throughout the city and we happened to be next to the Empire State Building. We looked at each other and said, let's go see what it looks like from the top. We've never done that before. We walked into the lobby and asked which elevator we should take, and the guy at the desk said, well, it's those elevators over there, but you're going to have to wait online. And we said, oh, no, you don't understand. We just want to run upstairs and take a peek, that's all. And he said, so do all of those people. People come from all over the world to run up there and take a peek. It's why you go to the Empire State Building. We went outside, saw that the line went and wrapped around the block, and decided to ditch it. To this day, I have never been to the top of the Empire State Building. We stay away from the tourist attractions in the city, which is why I found it so unusual that one Christmas we took our kids to Rockefeller Center to see the tree. Like novices, we decided to take our infant and toddler to go see the tree the week of Christmas. I have never seen so many people squeezed into one public plaza in my entire life. We had 2 kids at the time, and Trudy was holding our son's hand while I pushed the stroller. It was a sea of people, shoulder to shoulder, all looking up. Well, everyone except for me and my wife, who had our heads down, desperately trying not to lose our children. I don't think I got even a glimpse of the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree. It is a miracle that we made it out of that melee with both of our children. Rockefeller Center is named after the American businessman and philanthropist John D. Rockefeller Jr. He was the developer of the massive 22-acre complex in Midtown Manhattan, which was built during the Great Depression. It was supposed to be a city within a city, and it certainly does feel that way. The complex is made up of 14 Art Deco buildings right in the middle of Midtown Manhattan. But where did Junior get the money to build a sprawling megacomplex right in the middle of the biggest city on Earth? The answer, as many of us know, is dear old daddy. John D. Rockefeller Sr. was the OG robber baron. That term was used to describe a specific generation of industrialists with names like Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Morgan, Gould, and Frick. Each of them built enormous fortunes in the decades after the Civil War through methods that combined genuine industrial innovation with ruthless suppression of anyone who stood in their way. Rockefeller was at the top of that list. His company, Standard Oil, was so dominant that it was one of the prime reasons for the passage of the landmark Sherman Antitrust Act, the famous legislation that outlawed monopolies in the United States. Students still read the Standard Oil case in law school antitrust classes to this day. But even after the Sherman Antitrust Act broke apart his Standard Oil empire, John D. Rockefeller was still making waves. Newspapers ran cartoons of him as an octopus strangling the country. Journalists had spent a decade documenting his predatory business practices in enough detail to turn public opinion against him. But Rockefeller didn't care. He didn't give interviews. He didn't explain himself. He retreated behind lawyers and silence and let the hatred accumulate. Until disaster struck. The Colorado Fuel and Iron Company was a Rockefeller entity that employed roughly 10,000 miners in the southern part of Colorado. Most of the miners were immigrants from Greece, Italy, and Eastern Europe who worked under terrible conditions, both physically and financially. The company owned the towns where the miners lived. It owned the stores where they shopped. It owned the doctors who treated them. It paid them partially in scrip that could only be spent at company-owned establishments. It charged them for the equipment they needed to use to do their jobs, and it paid them terrible wages. In September of 1913, about 10,000 of these miners went on strike. Rockefeller managed the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company from his New York office, and both he and the company were having none of it. He wrote to management expressing his full support for suppressing the strike. So, the company carried out its owner's wishes. The Colorado Fuel and Iron Company started by evicting all of the striking workers from company housing immediately. The United Mine Workers of America helped the displaced families by setting up tent colonies in the surrounding hills. The largest of those colonies was located in the town of Ludlow, Colorado. There, about 1,200 men, women, and children lived in tents throughout the winter of 1913. And while the weather was very cold, the tension between the workers and their employer was super hot. The company hired 300 armed men from the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, a firm that specialized in breaking strikes. The state government could see a conflict on the horizon, so the Colorado National Guard was dispatched to the area to keep order. The only problem was that the cost of having the National Guard in Ludlow was being bankrolled by Rockefeller. So basically, he had a loyal, armed group of strikebusters supposedly being watched over by an equally loyal group of armed soldiers. Tensions between the armed guards, the soldiers, and the miners simmered for 7 months. And on April 20th, 1914, it boiled over. The National Guard opened fire on the tent colony with machine guns and rifles. Everyone ran for cover, including 2 women and 11 children who dug a pit inside their tent to hide from the gunfire. But they didn't know that they were digging their own graves. While they were hiding, their tent was set on fire, and they were burned alive. The battle at Ludlow lasted 14 hours. When it was over, 25 people were dead, and the incident became known as the Ludlow Massacre. The Ludlow Massacre ignited a national firestorm, and the country held John D. Rockefeller responsible. 5,000 people demonstrated on the law of the state capitol in Denver. Picket lines marched outside the Rockefeller offices at 26 Broadway in New York City. The Rockefeller name was now attached to the deaths of 13 women and children burned alive in a tent. The family reputation was taking a massive, nationwide beating. John D. Rockefeller needed help. The man he hired was named Ivy Ledbetter Lee. Ivy Lee was 36 years old, a Princeton graduate, and a former newspaper reporter who had spent the previous decade creating a business that didn't have a real name yet. Lee worked with corporations, and he realized that if a corporation suffered a disaster, like a railroad crash for instance, instead of suppressing the news, Lee would take reporters directly to the scene and give them access to all of the facts. Then the railroad was praised for its openness. Lee had discovered something significant. Dealing with difficult situations required one to relate to the public. Lee wrote down this philosophy in 1906 in what he called a Declaration of Principles. It was addressed to newspaper editors, and it read in part, "We aim to supply the news." Ivy Lee had just created the industry of public relations. Lee's PR strategy for rehabilitating Rockefeller had two components. First, Rockefeller had to go to Colorado in person. He had to tour the mines, eat in the miners' homes, attend their dances, listen to their grievances, and be photographed doing all of it. He had to transform himself from an abstraction, a name on a letterhead at 26 Broadway, into an actual human being. And that's what he did. Rockefeller went to Colorado. He danced with the miners' wives. He went down into the shafts. And this was all part of the plan that the public saw. And then, of course, there was the invisible behind-the-scenes effort that also occurred. Lee distributed a series of bulletins to newspaper editors, politicians, and opinion leaders across the country. The bulletins described the strike and its causes in terms that were favorable to the Rockefeller interests. They even recast what happened on the ground. The women and children who died at Ludlow, for instance, weren't burned alive by the National Guard. They died in an accident caused by an overturned stove. Of course, there was no overturned stove. Lee had written a piece of propaganda and distributed it to the country dressed as factual information. Ivy Lee had just invented spin. Sometimes that spin was based on honest reporting, and other times it wasn't. And whether it was one or the other didn't really matter. What mattered to Ivy Lee and his clients was that however it was spun, it all served the client's interests. Other journalists saw what Ivy Lee was doing, and they gave him a name that followed him for the rest of his career. They called him Poison Ivy. The Rockefeller campaign succeeded. By the time John D. Rockefeller Sr. died in 1937, most Americans remembered him primarily for his habit of handing out dimes to children he met on the street. That was a practice that good old Poison Ivy had orchestrated and publicized for decades. The Ludlow Massacre? It was a historical footnote. Poison Ivy created the spin machine. He created a mechanism that could be used to manipulate the public. And in the hands of an unethical PR rep, one who felt no compunction about lying, well, that could be a tool for spreading propaganda. For 80 years after Poison Ivy Lee invented the profession, public relations was pursued the same way. When a powerful person or institution faced a crisis, the job was to defend. Defend the client, contain the damage, control the narrative, humanize that client, and wait for the news cycle to move on. The PR agent's role was the shield, not the sword. That way of doing business in the PR world held until a 47-year-old political consultant from Carville, Louisiana, decided that it was wrong. James Carville was from Carville, Louisiana. Yes, James Carville was from Carville, Louisiana. The town was named after his paternal grandfather. James Carville was a PR guy who managed minor campaigns for most of his career until Bill Clinton hired him to run his 1992 presidential campaign. Carville brought a military mindset to the campaign. He called his approach the war room. Carville believed that in the modern media era, the candidate who controls the news cycle wins, and you control the news cycle not by defending your position, but by attacking your opponents. Carville took Poison Ivy's idea of public relations and weaponized it. Every accusation leveled against Bill Clinton during the presidential campaign was met with an instantaneous counter-accusation, or maybe a redirect, or even a direct assault on the credibility of whoever made the claim. The campaign didn't wait to see how damaging a story was before responding. It responded before the story fully landed. The strategy was about speed and assertiveness. Clinton won, and his strategist and Louisiana native James Carville earned the nickname the Ragin' Cajun. His war room approach became the model for every campaign that followed, and the political operatives who staffed it became valuable commodities. They had all shifted the Poison Ivy paradigm. The PR rep was no longer a journalist trying to affect a news cycle. They were an offensive-minded fixer. Johnny Depp was born in Owensboro, Kentucky in 1963. He spent his childhood moving between cities because his family relocated repeatedly, and they eventually settled in Florida. He dropped out of high school at 16 to play guitar in a band, but the band went nowhere. He ended up in Los Angeles, broke, doing odd jobs, until an actor friend suggested that he try auditioning. He did, although he didn't have any particular conviction for the industry. And he landed a role in the movie named A Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984. One role was all it took. He shot straight to stardom. Johnny Depp spent 3 seasons as a teenage undercover cop on the television series 21 Jump Street, and he became a teen idol. It was a status that he found suffocating. So instead of pursuing more roles like that, he used that platform to pursue the least commercial roles he could find. A fragile boy with scissors for hands, Hunter S. Thompson, an undercover FBI agent infiltrating the Bonanno crime family. In the process of playing those roles, he built a reputation as the most interesting actor of his generation. And then the Pirates of the Caribbean arrived in 2003 and made every other role he had look small. Captain Jack Sparrow was supposed to be a supporting character, but Johnny Depp turned him into one of the most recognizable characters in the history of cinema. He delivered a performance that was so interesting that the studio built 4 sequels around it. And then think about all the other films he did. Johnny Depp's films have grossed over $7.6 billion worldwide. He was, by any measure, one of the most bankable stars on the planet. By the time he met Amber Heard on the set of The Rum Diary in 2011, he had spent 30 years building something that almost no actor manages to construct. A fan base that loved him not just for a character or a franchise, but for who they believed he was. An eccentric, generous, anti-establishment rock star who also made movies. Johnny Depp and Amber Heard were married for about a year from 2015 to 2016. It was a short relationship and a contentious one. So contentious that a few years after their split, Heard wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post describing herself as a victim of domestic abuse. She didn't name Johnny Depp as the abuser, but he believed that the implication was clear. He felt like the entire world was now looking at him differently, and he knew that that could have a dramatic effect on his career. Johnny Depp operated in an industry where reputation was everything. Actors get roles because studios think their name will sell the film. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, a tainted celebrity means lost money at the box office. So when a celebrity's reputation is tarnished, it can literally end their career. To Johnny Depp, this was not a nasty claim by an ex-spouse. It was an existential threat to his billion-dollar mega career. Depp knew that he couldn't leave these allegations unanswered. He simply had to take action to protect his reputation. And in the modern world of PR, that action had 2 parts: legal and marketing. Depp probably believed that the only way for him to get true vindication was for a court to grant it. His lawyers probably told him that he had to sue for defamation and get a judgment. They might have sold him on what most people believe, that the lawsuit is an essential part of the equation because it's the only way to formally save his reputation. The problem is, a victory in court alone is meaningless in today's world. This is the age of social media. When you're a celebrity, your image on social media is probably your most important and valuable asset. Roles are won over other actors by having larger social media followings. Roles are lost by actors who have bad reputations on social media. The truth is, the reputation rehabilitation process requires success on both fronts, legal and marketing. One without the other is useless. So Depp started by suing Amber Heard. Depp sued Heard for $50 million claiming defamation. Professionally, this was an incredibly dangerous move. The entire effort could have blown up in his face because Amber Heard had some really good facts on her side. Not only did Amber Heard believe that the allegations were true, but there was evidence to support her claim. A court in the UK had recently found that Johnny Depp had committed 12 instances of domestic abuse. In that case, the judge identified 3 instances where he said Depp had put Amber Heard in fear for her life. When Depp tried to appeal that finding in the UK, the courts there turned him down. That made Depp's action in the United States all the more pressing. And for her part, Amber Heard was in the same industry and she had her own reputation to protect. And of course, there was her honest belief that she had been abused. So Heard countersued Depp for $100 million. The trial was televised live, but the real viewing was happening online. Every day, the testimony from that trial was exported directly to the phones of millions of people. There were no gatekeepers. Sure, there were journalists covering the story, but their voices were dwarfed by the fans, bloggers, and all those influencers online. People took what they saw and turned it into content. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, it all blew up. Johnny Depp knew that the narrative could get away from him. He had a huge social media following, and he surely realized that his legions of fans could be turned against him if he didn't try to direct the narrative in his direction. That's why Johnny Depp hired a crisis management team. Depp hired a firm named Hiltzik Strategies, and the person that was assigned to Depp as a crisis manager was Melissa Nathan. Melissa Nathan's firm understood something about this trial that Amber Heard's side did not. The courtroom was no longer the primary battlefield. The real contest was happening on the phones of 20 million people who were forming opinions in real time based on 30-second clips selected and distributed by online accounts that they didn't know and couldn't verify. The modern PR rep understood that in Hollywood, their job was not just crisis management, it was reputation management, and the ring where that battle is fought is online. And there's a whole industry dedicated to fighting that fight. The reputation management industry presents itself as a legitimate communication service. What it actually sells is the manipulation of reality. They try to dominate the internet for a client. A firm monitors what appears when you search a client's name, identifies negative content, and then tries to bury it under an avalanche of positive material. One person from the industry explained that the goal is to populate the first 2 or 3 pages of search results with content that's positive for your client. The negative story doesn't disappear, it just gets pushed to page 4 where nobody looks. That's the above-board end of the business. But the savvy reputation manager uses some not-so-above-board tactics as well. The less ethical PR outfits use fake reviews, smear campaigns, and shady SEO tactics to manipulate search results. More aggressive operations go even further. Spam bots can be launched against websites that post negative content, or viruses can be implanted into those websites to force them to temporarily or go permanently offline. Unscrupulous firms use fake names, hidden IP addresses, and planted news stories to manipulate public opinion. And one of the tactics that's gained steam recently is what they call astroturfing. Astroturfing is when the PR agency uses fake accounts to post positive content about a client. The content appears to be authentic, grassroots support, but it's actually a paid production. That's how the tactic got its name. It's not the product of a genuine grassroots movement. It's fake or synthetic. So they named the tactic after a brand of fake, synthetic grass. AstroTurf. In the new age of generative AI and ChatGPT, astroturfing is getting a little bit more sophisticated. Here's how it works. The reputation manager will make a comment on a social media site like Reddit. It'll kind of turn into a thread, with people commenting on the statement and that sort of thing. And then they release the bots. Thousands of fake accounts will like the post. That's an upvote on Reddit. Thousands of fake bots will like the post over and over again, and that reinforces the community endorsement of the post. Of course, it's all garbage. It's all fake. But no one can tell that from the outside. The generative AI platform then notices this popular post and incorporates that content into its system. If that doesn't happen organically, the reputation manager might be able to sell the content to the generative AI site. Either way, the generative AI trains itself on that content and voila, it becomes fact. Someone searches for it on ChatGPT, it pops up, and they automatically believe it. The industry has a term for those aggressive tactics. They call it dark PR. Melissa Nathan might not have used those unethical tactics, but what she did on behalf of Johnny Depp sure felt slimy. While the lawyers tried the case in the courtroom, Nathan tried the case in the court of public opinion. Clips that portrayed Depp in a sympathetic light circulated widely, and clips that showed Heard in a poor light circulated even wider. Every stumble by Amber Heard's legal team was amplified on social media. Every moment of apparent strength from Depp's side was packaged and distributed before the day's testimony had ended. Before, during, and after the trial, Heard faced a sustained wave of online harassment from Depp fans banding together under the hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp. The hashtag supporting Depp accumulated 21 billion views on TikTok alone. On the other hand, the hashtag supporting Amber Heard accumulated only 132 million. That ratio was not an accident of public sentiment. Bot Sentinel, which is an organization that tracks coordinated, inauthentic behavior online, they identified 300 fake accounts specifically targeting Heard with negative content while simultaneously amplifying positive material about Depp. No one knows who created those accounts, but they were there, and they helped. Amber Heard's reputation was getting trashed. The social media war was being won by Johnny Depp so decisively that Amber Heard fired her crisis PR team in the middle of the trial. She replaced them with a different firm that had less time, less preparation, and less understanding of the social media battlefield that they had already lost on. And it didn't help. When the trial was over, the jury deliberated for 13 hours and found unanimously that Heard had defamed Depp. He was awarded $15 million. Heard was awarded $2 million on a counterclaim, but it was pretty much a consolation prize. She was so humiliated and furious that she upped and moved to Spain. The Depp case was paradigm shifting. It was the first time an offensive crisis management effort was pursued almost entirely online. It was the first time that the reputational management model like that was put into gear on an exclusively social media effort. And it was a success. Every powerful person who saw that outcome drew the same conclusion. The offensive model worked in a world dominated by social media. And everyone in the industry quickly realized that reputation management was a two-part system. Part one was the lawsuit. The celebrity sues for defamation in an effort to dispel the allegations in court. You got to do this because the celebrity needs that court-ordered vindication. So the lawyers become an indispensable part of the reputation management team. But a win inside the courtroom will mean nothing unless you also have the support of the social media crowd. It's unfortunate, but for a celebrity, it's an absolute requirement. Melissa Nathan, the PR rep, basically rewrote the book for PR firms in the Johnny Depp case. She showed that the days of PR reps catering to reporters and magazine editors and critics, well, that was a thing of the past. Messages are sent from the celebrities directly to their fans on their cell phones. TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and Snapchat, they all rule the day in reputation management. And with the right tactics, anyone can be destroyed, even those with the facts on their side. And when you think about it, in that world and in that light, do the facts even really matter? Melissa Nathan was so successful that she decided to leave Hiltzik Strategies and open up her own firm. But when she got what appears to be her very first client, she made a rookie mistake that turned out to be devastating. Justin Baldoni wanted to be an athlete. He ran track in high school, competed seriously, and he had plans to continue at Cal State Long Beach. But a hamstring injury in his senior year of high school ended his dreams of athletic stardom. He drifted toward acting the way people drift toward things when their first plan fails. He didn't have a particularly strong desire to do it, but he didn't have any better alternatives. So Justin Baldoni moved to Los Angeles and started auditioning. The early years of that process were sort of crappy. He had small roles in forgettable films and television series throughout the mid-2000s. They were the kinds of credits that fill out a resume, but don't exactly indicate that there's a career there. He appeared in soap operas, and he appeared in a CBS movie called Spring Break Shark Attack. But he kept working. The role that changed his professional life arrived in 2014 when he was cast as Rafael Solano in Jane the Virgin on the CW. The show ran 5 seasons, won awards, and maybe most importantly for an actor, it developed a devoted audience. Baldoni played a wealthy, complicated man learning to be better, and he decided to make that his brand. Now, maybe I'm just cynical because I'm from New Jersey, but I'm always cautious about believing celebrities, well, ever. So you're going to have to forgive me for the level of skepticism that's going to be apparent when I tell you this part of the story. Baldoni gave a TED Talk in 2017 called Why I'm Done Trying to Be Man Enough. In the TED Talk, he admitted to silencing his wife, and he believed that he had to confront his own toxic masculinity. Baldoni said that he considered himself to be a feminist. He said, I had to ask myself a tough question. Am I man enough to just shut the hell up and listen? He explained that he had pledged to amplify women's voices in his career. The TED Talk got millions of views. Justin Baldoni, the moderately successful actor who was desperately trying to improve his career, now had the opportunity to build a platform. The TED Talk turned into a podcast where Baldoni said he was doing the work, exploring what it means to be a woke man. He even wrote a book called Man Enough. By the late 2010s, Baldoni had built a brand. He was a working actor and director and also considered a public intellectual on masculinity and emotional vulnerability. He spoke at conferences, he was invited to panels, he positioned himself explicitly as a man working to dismantle the toxic conventions of his own gender while making films about topics that matter. The wellness industry embraced him, and corporate sponsors engaged him. Baldoni parlayed his platform into a successful documentary producing career, and then he did what every actor wants to do: direct. His feature directorial debut arrived in 2019. 5 Feet Apart was a romantic drama about 2 teenagers with cystic fibrosis who fall in love while navigating a medical protocol that requires them to stay at least 5 feet apart at all times. It was produced modestly, but grossed $92 million worldwide. For a first feature, it was a remarkable commercial result. It told studios that Baldoni was the real deal. His instinct for emotional storytelling translated from documentary work to narrative work, and the audience he had built through his public advocacy and podcast followed him into the cinema. He founded Wayfarer Studios and began developing larger projects. The man who had started in Spring Break Shark Attack was now a studio head directing films that made $90 million. His next project was supposed to confirm that trajectory permanently. Baldoni optioned the rights to a book called It Ends With Us, a novel by Colleen Hoover about a woman escaping an abusive relationship. The book was hugely popular. It sold millions of copies and had a passionate fan base. Baldoni would direct the film and co-star in it, and he cast Blake Lively in the lead role. This was the biggest opportunity of his career, and it was also where everything went wrong. Blake Lively did not stumble into acting. She was born into it. Her father was an actor and director, and her mother was a talent scout. All four of her older siblings became actors, and she began her acting career at age 10 when she appeared in a film directed by her father. She describes the role as a bit part. Blake didn't intend to pursue acting seriously, but near the end of her junior year in high school, she landed a leading role in the film adaptation of a young adult novel called The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. The film was a hit, so she decided to be an actor. The role that made her famous came 2 years later. She was cast as Serena Vanderwoodson in Gossip Girl, a stylish blonde and somewhat reformed party girl who lived among privileged teenagers in New York City's Upper East Side. The show ran 6 seasons, and it made Blake Lively a celebrity. She married Ryan Reynolds in 2012. Reynolds was in the process of building something unusual, a celebrity brand that fused his ironic wit, social media savvy, and commercial investment ability into a single identity. He had bought into Aviation Gin, a booze that he later sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. He co-owned Wrexham AFC, a Welsh soccer club that became a television series, and we all know that he's a huge actor. Lively followed a similar model. She launched Betty Buzz in 2021, a line of premium sparkling mixers. The brand was positioned right alongside Ryan Reynolds' Aviation Gin, and the two brands played off each other. Lively understood that celebrity in the social media era was everything. Social media stardom ensured that you got the big acting role. Social media stardom meant that whatever businesses you started would be successful. By 2023, she was a celebrity entrepreneur with a devoted following, a high-profile marriage, 4 children, and a public image built around beauty, wit, and the appearance of someone in control of her own narrative. Then she agreed to star in It Ends With Us with Justin Baldoni, and that put her image, her businesses, and her career right in the crosshairs. Filming of It Ends With Us began in May of 2023, and from the very beginning, there was friction on the set. There were the usual types of Hollywood claims that cast members were being difficult, but there were also serious allegations. The worst of them was about sexual harassment. Lively claimed that Justin Baldoni was harassing her on the set. Lively alleged that Baldoni discussed her weight with her trainer, pressed her to disclose her religious beliefs, and talked about his sex life in inappropriate ways. Other actors also complained about a toxic environment on the set. But as things began to bubble to a froth, the heat was immediately turned down. Shortly after filming began, the famous writer's strike of 2023 hit, and everything was shut down. Several months went by, and eventually the strike settled, and everyone started to gear back up to return to filming. But Blake Lively put the resumption of the project on hold. She felt that her allegations of sexual harassment needed to be cleared up before production restarted. A meeting was set up for January 4th, 2024. Just before that meeting, Lively's lawyers sent Baldoni and his production company a list of protection demands that Blake was insisting on. They listed 30 unacceptable instances that occurred on set, and they wanted Baldoni's written agreement that the bad behavior would stop. Lively allegedly requested reforms like demanding that Baldoni not add any more sex scenes than were already in the script, and that the studio provide an intimacy coordinator on set at all times. Lively's husband, Ryan Reynolds, attended the meeting where Lively, Baldoni, and studio executives discussed her conditions for returning to complete the film. 17 of her demands were eventually put into the form of a contract, which everyone signed. Filming was tense and uneasy. I mean, how could it not be uncomfortable when the stars of a movie that's all about sex and domestic abuse needed a contract to address sexual harassment claims? Well, despite the immense friction between the stars, the movie got finished, and everyone moved on to the next phase of the project, promotion. And that was a mess, too. Blake Lively handled the promotion of the movie terribly. On the press tour, she was, of course, in the spotlight given that she was the star, but she chose to use that spotlight for personal gains. She promoted her line of alcohol mixers and she launched a hair care line, all while doing promotion work for the movie. She did these things with a bubbly, upbeat approach, which seemed like it didn't fit, given that she was promoting a movie about domestic abuse. Survivors of domestic abuse felt that Lively was not respecting their struggle, and both fans and critics alike considered her behavior to be tone-deaf. She seemed selfish. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni, who played the abuser in the film, was out there championing abuse survivors. But the public sensed that something was wrong. Internet sleuths were watching the movie's promotional events quite closely, and they noticed a bit of a pattern. Baldoni wasn't attending joint press events, and he and Blake Lively were generally steering clear of each other. Plus, the cast had unfollowed Baldoni on social media, and so had the author of the book that formed the basis of the movie, Colleen Hoover. And when it came to doing press, the rest of the cast did their press together, while Baldoni did his press alone. Fans flooded TikTok with rumors that the two stars weren't getting along. Sources told The Hollywood Reporter that there was a fracture between Baldoni and Lively in post-production, with two different cuts of the film emerging. Lively had allegedly commissioned a cut from an editor who worked with her husband's Deadpool movies. Then, their rift became obvious once the movie's New York premiere arrived. At that event, Lively posed for photographs with her castmates, her husband, and even Hugh Jackman. She did not pose with her co-star, Justin Baldoni. In fact, Baldoni arrived early and left before she got there, and the two leads didn't appear in a single photograph together at the premiere for their own film. Social media noticed two people who visibly couldn't stand to be in the same room with each other on a film where one of them played a man who beats his wife. The audience drew its own conclusions from what it could see, and what it could see was damning. Despite the tension between the stars, It Ends With Us was released in August of 2024, and it was a tremendous hit. It got good reviews and had a ton of audience interest. And it was a financial win for the studio as well. It cost $25 million to make, but it grossed $350 million at the box office. But for Justin Baldoni, it was a disaster brewing. The social media narrative that was forming was that Baldoni had done something to make Lively and the entire cast turn their backs on him. Sure, it was all speculation, but it was speculation built on public behavior that was genuinely unusual and sort of troubling. Worse yet, Justin Baldoni knew what the public did not yet know. Baldoni knew what Lively had on him. He knew that even if Blake Lively was shooting herself in the foot with some tone-deaf moves during the movie's promotion, the public would not be against her if the documentation in her possession were to come out. That 17-point list that they turned into a contract, which set forth all of Lively's complaints on the set, it existed in writing. Ryan Reynolds, a person with a huge social media platform, he had been in the room for the meetings where that contract was drawn up. Baldoni knew that other actresses had complained about his behavior on set, and he knew that if any of that became public, his carefully constructed identity as Hollywood's leading male feminist, the man who gave the TED Talks about toxic masculinity and who wrote books about being a better man, all of that would be destroyed. The pressure on Baldoni to do something was building. Social media was painting him as an abusive director who had made his lead actress uncomfortable in a film about domestic abuse. The optics were catastrophic, and since we are in the age where social media optics are essential to one's career, Baldoni knew that it was just a matter of time before the social media world ate him alive. It seems he was panicking. He must have considered the situation and realized that he only had two options. First, he could get ahead of the storm that he knew was coming. He could publicly acknowledge that there were tensions on the set, express regret, take some version of accountability, and hope the story lost oxygen. That's the old school PR approach. The other approach is that he could attack. He could go on the offensive and try to destroy Blake Lively's credibility before she had a chance to reveal the seedy details of the movie's filming. That approach must have seemed particularly enticing and achievable. It makes sense that he'd think that way given what he just watched happen in his industry. Like the rest of us, Justin Baldoni watched the Johnny Depp trial. He saw the evidence against Depp, including the domestic abuse the judge found over in the UK. And despite all of that, Baldoni watched Depp's crisis management team take Amber Heard apart. It seems that Justin Baldoni believed that the same tactics could be used in his case. That's probably why Justin Baldoni hired a crisis management team to engage in a preemptive strike against Blake Lively. The goal seems to have been to turn Blake Lively into Amber Heard 2.0. Baldoni likely wanted to turn the internet against Lively before she said anything publicly, so that if she did eventually speak, the audience would already have been primed to distrust her. Destroy her reputation in advance, the theory went, so that even if she dares open her mouth, no one will believe what comes out. Since Baldoni was taking a page from the Johnny Depp playbook, it made sense to take on his team as well. Justin Baldoni hired Melissa Nathan, formerly of Hilt 6 Strategies, but now heading up her own PR firm called The Agency Group. Melissa Nathan got to work developing the narrative, and through September and October of 2024, the online environment around Blake Lively darkened steadily. Old interviews resurfaced. Clips were recast in a negative light and shared extensively. Her tone-deaf moments during the press tour were amplified and also sent throughout social media. Each news cycle produced fresh reasons to dislike her, and each fresh reason appeared to emerge organically from an outraged public rather than from a paid operation running out of a crisis PR firm's offices. The machine was working. Lively was feeling the pressure. In September 2024, she was scheduled to host the premiere episode of Saturday Night Live's 50th anniversary season. But the internet was buzzing with so much negativity about her that she decided to back out. She also canceled a major Target corporate event for her hair care company. The woman who had spent years perfecting the appearance of total control had gone quiet. But while all of this was going on, Justin Baldoni's PR rep, Melissa Nathan, was making a rookie mistake. Maybe it was because she recently started her own firm and got overwhelmed with running the show in its entirety. Or maybe it wasn't actually an individual mistake at all. Maybe what she did was standard operating procedure in the industry. Either way, Melissa Nathan did the one thing my wife always told me not to do. Throughout my legal career, throughout my work in nonprofits, throughout my work as a CLE speaker, in every instance of my professional life, my wife has always told me, don't put things you don't want people to read in writing. She always warned me, you need to believe that everything you put in writing will be seen by someone at some time and thrown back in your face. You must assume that everything you write down will eventually be read. So if you don't want anyone to know it, then don't put it in writing. Melissa Nathan did not know my wife, because she and her team put their entire strategy on behalf of Justin Baldoni in writing. They texted everything to each other and to their client, and in the process, they created a written trail of Justin Baldoni's entire effort to destroy Blake Lively. And then someone leaked it all to Blake Lively's team. It's not clear who leaked the information, but it's very apparent that someone did. Lively's team seems to have been given a treasure trove of texts and chat messages and other communications. They all informed Lively of one thing. It sure looked like Justin Baldoni was coming after her. And when she found out what was going on, Blake Lively and her team got to work. While Nathan's operation was flooding social media with negative content, Lively's team was collecting. They collected every text message, every chat, every email. It seemed like whoever gave Blake Lively the initial text messages was continuing to give her communications. Baldoni had no idea he was running an offensive operation against someone who was quietly assembling the evidence of that operation in real time. All of this, Baldoni's efforts, Blake Lively's information collection, all of this was happening below the surface. No one in the public knew what Baldoni's reputation management firm was doing, and no one knew that Blake Lively was watching them do it. To the public, Justin Baldoni continued to be a vehement promoter of women's rights. Sure, he may have been having a disagreement with a co-star, but the overall profile he presented to the world was a man who fought for women. In fact, the public continued to be so swayed by his reputation that he was getting awards. On December 9, 2024, Baldoni received an award from the organization known as Vital Voices Solidarity Awards. He got it for his allyship on behalf of women's rights. But less than 2 weeks later, the group would have cause to reconsider that award. That's because on Friday, December 20th, 2024, Blake Lively revealed her team's intelligence gathering efforts in spectacular fashion. She filed a shocking complaint with the California Civil Rights Department, claiming that Baldoni acted inappropriately on the set of It Ends With Us. She also claimed that Baldoni engaged in a smear campaign against her. And just in case the complaint itself wasn't enough of a shock, it seems that Lively's team worked with the newspapers to get out her story. The day she filed her complaint, the New York Times published an explosive 4,000-word article about the entire matter. The report laid bare all of the evidence that Lively had collected about the Baldoni operation, and it painted a horrible picture of her co-star. The New York Times article cited documents submitted by Lively that accused Baldoni, his co-producer, and their production company of orchestrating a smear campaign designed to destroy Lively's reputation in retaliation for speaking up about alleged sexual harassment on the set. They accused Baldoni's team of behavior that was straight out of the Johnny Depp playbook: planted stories, artificially boosted social media posts, and astroturfing. Hollywood very quickly dumped Justin Baldoni. He must have been stunned. The weapon he had been allegedly building for months that he hoped to use to destroy Blake Lively, it whipsawed against him. He must have been absolutely shocked by the speed and ferocity of the blowback. On the very day the New York Times report was printed, his agents dropped him as a client. Then, a spokesman for the Vital Voices Solidarity Awards announced that it was rescinding the award that they gave Baldoni less than 2 weeks earlier. To make matters worse, the female co-host of his podcast, Man Enough, well, she quit the project. Others lined up squarely behind Blake Lively as well. Sony Pictures, the studio that distributed It Ends With Us, they publicly supported Lively in connection with her work on the blockbuster movie without directly mentioning Baldoni. Sony's statement said, quote, "We have previously expressed our support for Blake in connection with her work on and for the film. We fully and firmly reiterate that support today." A Sony representative told Variety, quote, "Further, we strongly condemn any reputational attacks on her. Any such attacks have no place in our business or in a civil society." And the hits kept on coming. On Christmas Eve, Baldoni and his publicists received a defamation suit from the co-founder of his own movie studio. And then Blake Lively seized the public narrative. In her first statement after filing the complaint, she described her legal action as an important step towards eliminating hostile work environments on Hollywood sets. She said, "I hope my legal action helps pull back the curtain on these sinister retaliatory attacks to harm people who speak up about misconduct and helps protect others who might be targeted." Baldoni's head must have been spinning. Only a few months ago, he was mapping out strategy with his crisis managers. And for a while, it was they who were on the offensive. But in the blink of an eye, the tide had turned. Now it was Justin Baldoni who was squarely on the defensive, and he was being forced to do something that would surely cost him a pretty penny. He had to turn things over to his lawyers. Baldoni's lawyers started fighting back in the press. He called Lively's allegations completely false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious. Then, a month later, he went to court. First, Baldoni sued his publicist, Melissa Nathan. Then he sued the New York Times for their story about the matter. The website Deadline explained that Baldoni's 87-page libel complaint against the Times accused New York Times journalists of being in cahoots with Lively by printing a lengthy article that cherry-picked and altered communications, stripped of necessary context, and deliberately spliced them together so that they would mislead the public. A few days later, Lively took that discrimination complaint she made to the California State Agency and turned it into a lawsuit that she filed in the California courts. Now Baldoni had to respond to a lawsuit. But he was in a bind. He couldn't just go defensive. He couldn't just respond to Lively's complaint and say, I didn't do it. That would look terrible to the social media crowd. No, the only option in today's try every case in the court of public opinion world was to countersue. So Baldoni hit Blake Lively with a $400 million counterclaim. The problem was, Baldoni's counterclaim was sort of ridiculous. Baldoni alleged that Blake Lively and her husband were trying to steal the movie from him. He claimed that the pressure Lively and her husband were applying was not about sexual harassment. It was an extortion campaign perpetrated by the two of them that was designed to wrest control of the movie from Baldoni. Now you're probably thinking what I was thinking. Extortion? Why did he make that claim? Why not just sue for defamation? He couldn't just sue for defamation. He had to allege something serious. That's because Justin Baldoni is a public figure. When you're a public figure, the standard for defamation is higher. You can't just say that some person said something mean and untrue about you. When you're a celebrity, you have to show that the offender had actual malice against you. In Johnny Depp's case, that wasn't so tough. The allegations that Amber Heard were making against him were about physical abuse, and if that were untrue, it's serious enough to fit into the actual malice category. But if you're Justin Baldoni and the essence of your claim is that Blake Lively was being mean to you, well, there's no actual malice there. On the other hand, if you claim that she was trying to extort you, well, that's pretty malice-like. Unfortunately, the argument seems ridiculous. But Baldoni didn't seem to have anything else. What I don't understand is why did his lawyers allow him to make such a ridiculous claim? I mean, it doesn't seem as if the claim was frivolous. There was probably evidence of Lively trying to hire an alternate film editor and stuff like that. But even if it wasn't frivolous, it's still ridiculous. Shouldn't his lawyer have said, Justin, you're wasting your money here. This claim is going nowhere. And what about that reputation management firm? How did they not say, Justin, you're digging yourself deeper. You're going to make the situation worse. I think it's pretty obvious why no one told him to stop. They probably all wanted to get paid. Think about it. A wealthy client with a colorable claim of defamation that could produce years of legal fees. Why would any lawyer try to talk a client out of a suit that could spin off revenue for the firm for years? They're actually far more likely to do the exact opposite, don't you think? To egg on the client, to convince them to file suit. They're far more likely to try to convince the client that a defamation case, no matter how speculative, is the best thing they can do to rehabilitate their reputation. Not because it's true, but because it's lucrative for the lawyer. I don't know if that's what actually happened, but it sounds plausible. Well, Baldoni and his lawyers filed that counterclaim for defamation. And then both he and Blake Lively let their lawyers loose on the media. Baldoni's lawyers went on the Megyn Kelly show and defended his client. In the process, he talked a little crap about Ryan Reynolds, and Lively's side insisted that Baldoni's lawyer be disciplined for it. Then Baldoni's side created a website, an online archive of all of the evidence on his side. It included a timeline of text messages, emails, and other kinds of communications around the events from the filming of the movie. The theory seems to be that transparency would win over public opinion. Meanwhile, the court cases are churning on. There are case management hearings, attempts to take depositions, and lawyers seeking protective orders. Justin Baldoni probably sat back, looked at the situation, and thought to himself, what the heck is happening? How did this all fall apart so dramatically? He followed the map drawn by Johnny Depp, and yet things were not working out nearly as well for him. What Justin Baldoni probably realized right then is that he's no Johnny Depp. Justin Baldoni was popular, but Johnny Depp was a megastar. When Melissa Nathan started to work for Johnny Depp, he had so much worldwide support that all she had to do was ride the wave to the shore. But with Justin Baldoni, she had to create the wave. Justin Baldoni didn't have billions of followers like Johnny Depp. He didn't have the star power to bury anyone, no less a supremely popular social media rock star like Blake Lively. So instead of controlling a narrative and coming out a winner, he found himself embroiled in a messy lawsuit that was, frankly, making him look foolish to the public. He apparently looked foolish to the court, too, because the judge soon dismissed his claim. The court found that Baldoni's claims didn't constitute civil extortion under California law. Surprise! The judge held that Lively's acts appeared to be legally permissible hard bargaining or renegotiation. So he dismissed the claim. The judge gave Baldoni about a month to think about his claims and the opportunity to file an amended complaint. Basically, the judge was saying, listen, if you want to try with another claim, I'll take a look at it. Baldoni didn't bother. Why? Why would he abandon his claim after all this fighting? It wasn't only because his case against Blake Lively was garbage. It was probably also because he firmly believed that Blake Lively's case was garbage too. Instead of refiling his claims, Justin Baldoni made a motion to dismiss Blake Lively's case, and he was pretty much successful. The judge looked at the evidence and obviously saw that this was a case where both of the stars were miserable on the set, they were both upset with each other during the filming, and when you read the content of the text messages on both sides, you wonder why anyone thought it was a good idea to file these claims in the first place. ABC News explained that in one of the texts, Blake Lively expressed her frustration with filming to a journalist. She said that she came home and cried on one occasion. She wrote, "They're just being creeps." Then there was a text exchange between Baldoni and another actor, which showed that Baldoni was also frustrated while making the film. He complained that Lively was allegedly threatening not to promote the movie if she was not allowed to take part in the edit. Baldoni wrote in one message, "If she doesn't promote the movie, she can leak that I'm a bad person or that she felt unsafe with me and all the stuff she has on me, then she's the victim." Then there were the text messages between Blake Lively and her friend Taylor Swift. In one exchange, Swift calls Baldoni a bitch. Does this sound like actual malice to you? No, what it sounds like is two rich celebrities whining about each other. And that seems to be how the court saw it. That's why, a few months after dumping Justin Baldoni's case, the court pretty much dumped Blake Lively's case too. Again, ABC News reported on April 2nd, 2026, a federal judge in New York gutted much of Lively's case against Baldoni, including claims that she was subjected to sexual harassment on set. In his ruling, the judge said that some of Baldoni's conduct was not so far beyond what might reasonably be expected to take place between two characters in a sexually charged movie like It Ends With Us. That Baldoni suggested scenes involving sexual acts in the context of developing a motion picture involving such adult themes did not create a sexually objectionable environment or an environment hostile to women or men because of sex. The judge dismissed almost the whole complaint. The judge allowed Lively to pursue her claims about the orchestrated smear campaign, but he dismissed all the other stuff. The judge then scheduled a trial date, but about a week before that date, the parties settled. What do they settle for? Well, the terms are confidential, but it pretty much seems like the answer is nothing. No money was exchanged, and there was no requirement for a non-disclosure agreement. There's apparently one claim for attorney's fees that Lively is still permitted to pursue, but it must not be a big deal because neither side was focusing on it. It basically seems like everybody just sort of walked away. The entire case looks like it was an exercise in futility. No one's going to get closure. We certainly aren't. No one knows what really happened because the case settled and no one was forced to testify under oath. No legal determination was made, so no one could truly declare victory. The only thing this case did was damage the reputation of everyone involved. Everyone. Justin Baldoni thought he was a big shot who could force another celebrity to bend at will. He developed a reputation and following that most actors would die for, and then he flushed it down the drain. After filing this complaint and going through this whole effort, his career has stagnated. He hasn't acted in anything in years. His podcast about toxic masculinity is basically dead, and he lost his movie studio deal. Everything he built went up in smoke. The PR rep, Melissa Nathan, she thought she had mastered a new form of PR, but she soon was alleged to have made terrible errors in judgment. Her agency still exists, but no one seems to be talking about it. Blake Lively, she's still acting, but reports state that the lawsuit had a significant negative effect on her earning power. And her side businesses took a beating. Her beauty brand and drink mix businesses have reportedly lost millions of dollars. The only people who won were the lawyers, because we always get paid. There is one way this case can continue. Since there's no non-disclosure agreement, either party can apparently talk about the matter. Word on the street is that Justin Baldoni is going to try to tell his side of the story. If that's true, then here is what I have to say to Mr. Baldoni. Justin, how have you not learned your lesson? For the love of everything holy, keep your mouth shut. And you know what? That goes for you too, Blake Lively. Both of you should be thinking, let this end with us. So you listened to the story, and now it's your turn to let me know what you thought. Do you think I should do a good actors gone bad story every once in a while? Like I said in the opening, I can sprinkle one in periodically if you think they're interesting. But I got to tell you, I'm afraid of going too off-brand. Let me know what you think. Good Lawyers Gone Bad is my handle on Instagram and Facebook, or go to goodlawyersgonebad.com and send me a message. I really do want to know what you think because I want to create content that you guys enjoy. Thanks very much for listening, everyone, and Haley and Ross, drive carefully.